Whether you like it or not, President Joe Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act and student loan forgiveness. We're going to focus on the latter, which our guest calls a dirt sandwich. Let's welcome back our friend Karyn Cavanaugh, Certified Financial Advisor and Chief Investment Officer for Carolina's Wealth Management on this Money Monday. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
A dirt sandwich. Doesn't sound very appetizing.
No, everyone likes a sandwich, but not a dirt one.
So a dirt one indeed. So why, in your view, is the student loan forgiveness program such a bad idea?
Well, it's going to be somewhat helpful to some people, but the average student loan balance is around $30,000. So you're getting $10,000. Yeah, that does help, and you can then re-amortize your loan, and your payments will be lower. But it also is somewhat insulting to everybody who paid for their tuition, who saved, and who has paid off their loans. So I think that it's not necessarily that helpful, and it's also unhelpful to the people that really sacrificed.
And before we get into exactly how one does qualify, because there are certain requirements that you need to meet before you get the okay on that, but also here in South Carolina, if you do get the forgiveness, you're actually not taxed on it.
Correct.
Whereas you are in some other states.
Right.
So here you're actually not taxed on it, otherwise it would be considered income.
Right.
But other than that, people who were really up in arms said, well, whoa, I just paid off my loans this year, or I've been making payments all this time. There is a little bit of good news for them.
Yes, if you were making payments during the moratorium where tuition was frozen, or loans were frozen, and you didn't have to pay them back, then you can get a refund for that. But you're going to have to fill out a form, and those forms come out in early October.
Okay, well, so that's a little bit of good
Yes.
news. So exactly how does it work?
Well, if you make less than $125,000 and you have a federal student loan, not a private loan, you're eligible for $10,000 of forgiveness, and $20,000 if you had a Pell Grant, if you went to college on a Pell Grant. So if you have that, then you can go ahead and do it, and it's federally tax-free and state tax-free, as we discussed for South Carolina.
Okay, and I know that Navient's CEO, Navient is the student loan company that bought up Sallie Mae, which a lot of people have heard of. Well, the CEO of that company says people are just confused, because when you say federal student loan, well, there's a few different kinds of federal student loans, and they were also thinking there were federal student loans through the Department of Education versus this versus that. So how do you come equipped knowing exactly what kind of a loan you have before you make that call, and the person picking up the phone who doesn't know what they're talking about says either you're denied or good news, you're qualified?
Well, I would say if you're denied, make sure you look further. But you can take a look at your loan origination documents and see who the originator of your loan was. And if it's a federal agency, then I would push to make sure that I was getting my forgiveness if I was due it. So if it's a private loan, you'll see that too. But just make the phone call to look at your origination documents. And those are documents that you should have been reading anyway, so that you know the actual terms of your loan.
Okay, and then is it possible for these loans to sort of have new life after time, because the debts are constantly getting purchased and sold, and going through?
True, they might go through different servicers, but it's the same. It's going to be the same terms of your original loan. But they'll re-amortize it so that you will have a lower payment. They'll take the $10,000 off of it, and depending if you have multiple student loans, they have a hierarchy or a tier structure that they'll go through that for as well.
But what you've said is this is not addressing the problem.
Yeah.
What is the problem, Karyn?
Well, the problem is that we now have high inflation, but for decades we did not have high inflation. In fact, the Fed couldn't reach their core PCE targets for inflation, and student tuition was going up at much higher rates than CPI, and there's not really any explanation for that, especially because these are financial institutions. They have a higher learning. They should be able to keep their house in order, and rising costs has been a problem for 20 years, 25 years. And so now that we do have inflation, I'm worried that we're going to see tuition rise even faster. And that's going to put more pressure on students, borrowers, to take on more risky debt and to not be able to pay it back. So there really isn't anything that addressed the core problem here, is that rising costs are making tuition unaffordable for students.
So you don't see a stem and flow of applications to these universities, to these learning institutions, or do you think eventually that may come to pass?
No, I think in fact there's more reason to go ahead and apply and go to college based on the fact that perhaps I can just take out some student loans, federal student loans, and they'll be forgiven. I think it sets a bad precedent.
Right. Well, if someone applies and they start college, well, another 4 years, Depends on who's in office by that point. But I mean, come the next president, they could completely wipe that off the books and say, no more.
Absolutely, because I mean, there is some questions on whether or not this is actually a legal thing that occurred, that you could just wipe out that. Because remember, debt forgiveness it's not a free lunch. You know, somebody's got to pay for it, and that's going to be the taxpayers, because this is money that's earmarked for other programs that will now have to be going towards that.
Just real quick, with a few seconds left, can you tell us what advice you have for students who may want an alternative to the university experience?
Well, stay in state, use your 529 plans, and if you live in South Carolina, go to Trident. Trident is free through 2023. So take advantage of those kind of things so that you're not paying. Yeah, free is good. Free is better than debt forgiveness. Free.
Exactly. Karyn, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good to see you again. We're back after this.